Good morning. The Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry will now come to order. This is the first in a series of hearings to help this committee prepare for the next Farm Bill. We will be taking an inventory of what we have, obviously from the 2008 Farm Bill, and ensuring that it is working properly, but doing so with our eye on the future. So thank you very much for being here today, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. I'd like to ask the witnesses of the third panel to come forward as the gentlemen are leaving. I'll go ahead and get started with that. We will probably have an interruption, but I think Senator Chambliss and I will be able to manage with the vote so that we can continue the hearing and get through. The third panel and final panel is composed of a diverse group of producers. They're Dow Brantley from England, Arkansas, Thomas Johnny Cochran from Sylvester, Georgia, Chris Pawelski from Goshen, New York, and Mark Watne from Jamestown, North Dakota. I just remind all of you all that your written testimony will be submitted for the record. I will also take this opportunity to say that members may have questions that they'd like to submit. I know Senator Harkin had a few questions. It may have been of the Secretary, but certainly of either of these second and third panels, they may have questions, and if they do, we'll be sure to get those questions to you so you can answer them. Beginning with Dow Brantley. Dow is a third-generation farmer and a partner of Brantley Farming Company in England, Arkansas. Dow joined the family operation in 2000 and produces cotton, corn, rice, and soybeans on approximately 8,500 acres. He is active in the National Cotton Council, USA Rice Federation, Arkansas Ag Council, and the Arkansas Farm Bureau. Dow, thank you for being here, and a very special thanks. Your father's been a tremendous mentor to me, and grateful to all of your family for what you all do for us in Arkansas. So if you'll give your testimony, and then we'll continue, Dow.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Mr. Chris Pawelski. He is a specialty crop farmer from the town of Florida in Orange County, New York. Onion farming, like most specialty crop farming, is a very hands-on, labor-intensive form of farming, and Chris is involved in all aspects of his family's operation. Currently, he farms with his father Richard and his brother Brian. They grow 99 acres of onions and 8 acres of butternut squash. Mr. Pawelski, welcome.
Thank you. I'd like to first thank Madam Chairman Lincoln and Ranking Member Chambliss, first for both for pronouncing my name correctly. Usually I tell people, say Chris something Polish. The fact that both of you pronounced it correctly was outstanding, so I'd like to thank you for that. I'd also like to thank my Senator Kirsten Gillibrand for affording this opportunity to address you today as a specialty crop farmer from New York who's had extensive experience with the federal crop insurance program, specifically the multi-peril crop insurance program, or the MPCI policy. And though I'm testifying alone, my wife, Eve, who's here with me, has been my full partner over the last 14 years, who's worked hard with me, making the various improvements to our policy, and without her hard work and imagination, I would not be here today. On Monday, I received a letter from the head of RMA, Bill Murphy, who was here today, who soundly rejected my wife and my reform proposals for the MPCI policy. I will be including it for the record for this hearing. Bottom line, when you read the letter, you walk away with the notion there is absolutely nothing wrong with the MPCI policy and all is functioning well. Of course, this doesn't explain why Congress the last 15 years has had to pass multiple crop loss programs as well as create a permanent disaster rate program as part of the last Farm Bill. Since 1996, our region has been struck by a series of catastrophic weather events. And over the years, Eve and I have done our very best to improve our policy. This has included fixing the expected market price, which was set at less than half of what it should be, fixing a replant feature, which was set at a fraction of what it should be, and getting a pilot program for a no stages option for our New York State onion growers, which was done with the hard work of our congressman at the time, Ben Gilman. Unfortunately, there are two facets of the MPCI policy that we've made no headway on, and it's for this reason, for the first time since 1996, we on our farm have not purchased buy-up coverage for this year, and so have most of the crop growers in Orange County. We believe that the minimal catastrophic coverage is virtually worthless, but we paid the administrative fee for this coverage so as to have access to the USDA programs. Crop insurance reform over the years has typically involved increasing the federal subsidy rates to make the policies cheaper to the farmer, but there's very little discussion as to why these policies don't pay out, which is a primary reason why farmers are reluctant to participate. Farmers wonder why anyone would think making a problematic policy cheaper would entice them to buy it. We often ask, when will someone address the various problematic policy provisions, or what I call gimmicks, that quite often make the policies resemble more of a shell game than insurance? There are two main provisions I want to discuss. One is a facet which is in all MPCI policies called production account, and all decrease drastically in value when a farmer's actual production history, or APH, starts to plummet due to successive weather disasters. What happened to me last year perfectly illustrates the problem. In 2009, I grew 41 acres of onions, and I bought the buy-up level coverage of 7,100, 70% of my crop at 100% the price. The premium total was $29,507. I paid $9,924. The rest was paid by the taxpayer. Last season, we had 28 inches of rain during the summer, which meant that most of the onions either didn't make a bulb, or many of them, and many were rotten. Due to my successive disaster years, my APH was lower, so my loss in real terms, though, was roughly in the neighborhood of $115,000. But thanks to my lower APH and production account, my indemnity was $6,729. I didn't make back the premium. The insurance company pocketed the difference as an underwriting gain. I suffered a $115,000 crop loss, had 7,100 coverage, and I still owed a $3,000 premium. You have to ask the question, what is the purpose of this policy? In a hearing held in 2009 by the House Subcommittee for Risk Management, the topic of shallow losses repeatedly came up. No one seemed to understand why shallow losses are a problem. The facet of production account is the reason why shallow losses occur. And my wife and I have a proposal, a sound proposal, to reform production account to do it. And if you read my written testimony, it details it. But essentially, what production account does, they take the percentage of your crop that's not covered, plus also whatever you salvage, and they're calling it a deductible. And what they're doing is they're guaranteeing a loss, and it's a sliding scale. And the less damage you have, the greater the deductible is. So that's how you can think you have 75% coverage, when in fact, you don't have that. You can have a 25% loss and get nothing. Our idea, our basic reform idea, is basically whatever you salvage, plus your coverage level cannot exceed 100% of your APH. So you'd actually come close to whatever your coverage level is. And again, if you refer to my written testimony, you'll see it in more detail with examples. We have, again, worked on this for 14 years. Quite often, when we talk to people in D.C. at RMA, we've been received very positively. Unfortunately, the people who seem to call the shots in Kansas City and Raleigh are not as supportive. There's stonewalling, and arguments over semantics are endless, and quite often the farmer's to blame. Yet the problem always is still there with the MPCI policy. And this is a primary tool for us, for specialty crop farmers, especially monocropping specialty crop farmers. This is the only safety net we have, and it's inadequate. So unless this policy provision and the problem with APH is being skewed due to successive losses, you're not going to be able to fix it. So I also, in my written testimony, you can ask about it as well, I have another example of what production account did a couple of years ago, where I had onions that I destroyed that were immature, that made no sense against my indemnity. I can explain. But in conclusion, I again want to thank you again for this hearing and inviting me here before you. Again, my wife and I have spent a great deal of time and energy trying to improve our MPCI policy, and we firmly believe if APH reform was done and our proposal to reform production account was implemented, the MPCI policy would be a valuable tool and an integral part of specialty crop producers' safety net. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your patience in terms of our having to juggle votes on the floor. Again, wanted to welcome Dow Brantley. Obviously, I know him from Arkansas, but also want to thank Mr. Cochran. I know he's here at the recommendation of Senator Chambliss, and grateful for your input here today. Mr. Pawelski, you're here at the recommendation of Senator Gillibrand, who speaks very highly of you, and we're grateful that you're here today. And Mr. Watne, obviously at the recommendation of Senator Conrad, you're here today. I was with him on the elevator going over to the vote, and he wanted to apologize for not being here as well. He's at the same Deficit Reduction Commission meeting that Senator Baucus had to run off to, and so certainly want to tell all four of you all how much we appreciate your being here. And I would just simply say to you, please don't underestimate the role that you play as we move forward, both you and your colleagues across the country, and your input is going to be absolutely vital in being able to get it right in the structuring of the 2012 Farm Bill. So we appreciate that you're here today, but hope that you'll remain in constant contact with us as we move forward and look at how we can do a better job at supporting our farm families and ranchers across the country. So we really appreciate that. I guess just some kind of generic questions for you all individually, and I'm not sure that you've mentioned it in your testimony or not, but would be curious to know what safety net programs you all participate in, and if you would, for your region and your crop and other circumstances, if you could pick the one that is the most important to you and for what reasons. And what other programs are important to you, but maybe one that's the most important and why. Is it more dependable? Is it something that allows you to manage certain aspects of your production and your operation? So, Dow?
Thank you. I think, two of the most important programs for me are the marketing loan program and the direct payment program. Marketing loan, just the ability to have a loan to market my crop over the 9 months that we are given to do that. The direct payment is a sense of security for us, for our banker, that we have some income coming from the farm or from the land that we produce these crops on. Those two programs have been key for not only us, but anybody in Arkansas and across the Mid-South.
Thanks. Do you participate in the other programs? Are there any other programs?
Not administered through the FSA. We're in NRCS, several conservation programs.
Mm-hmm. Johnny?
Along the same lines, the marketing loan program in cotton as well as in peanuts, both are very important to us. The marketing loan program allows, like Dow said, allows us to market our crop over a 9-month period, with having cash flow when we harvest the crop, and which is much needed. And of course, crop insurance, we do buy up crop insurance. It is an essential risk management tool on our farm, and we utilize crop insurance to grow.
For all of the crops that you grow?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thanks. Mr. Pawelski?
For my area, it's mostly on muck soil. It's mostly vegetables that are grown, some sod. So almost as far as risk management, crop insurance and NAP are what's available. Like we mentioned in my written testimony, talks about my wife and I, like I said, worked 14 years to improve our policy best we can, and we've hit the wall. One thing I didn't talk about, it's in the written form, I didn't mention orally, but just how bizarre the current policy is. In '07, we were wiped out by a flood. The Wallkill River flooded. And I had planted, much of the valley planted, and I replanted afterward. I lost 26 acres to the flood, and I replanted afterward. And when I replanted, I lost it all again, plus an additional 10 acres, and other people as well all around me, obviously, because it was too hot and too dry. And the onions, the special provision policy for the onions calls for if over 50% of the crop is damaged, you're allowed to destroy the crop in the field. And within the rules itself, it says in the, I'm not making this up, in the onion law standbook, it says if the damage to harvested, unharvested, mature onion production exceeds a percentage, which is 50%, no production will be counted if it's not sold. So, in other words, if you destroy it, it's not counted against you. But RMA interpreted, well, if the word mature is used there, that must mean immature should be treated differently. So those little plants that were this tall, the 8 or 9% that were an inch high, even though I destroyed them, they counted it against our indemnity and subtracted it, even though you're not selling them. Even though the policy says itself later, if you have an onion that makes a bulb and you don't sell it, you destroy it, it doesn't count against you. And there's no basis for that in the policy itself. And whenever we would raise this issue with, again, we first raised it with the administrator's office at the time, they would say, well, that makes sense, what you're saying, but then they would talk to Kansas City, would defend this. And there's like a level of disconnect there that makes no sense. And that's what we really need to, this kind of thing we need to get it fixed. But currently, as far as risk management, safety net stuff, crop insurance, we have a conservation program. We have a proposal out there for a conservation of muck soils program. Our Congressman Hall got it in the House version of the last Farm Bill, and we're hoping that it would make it the next version. I know Senator Gillibrand will be talking to you about that.
Good. Well, those are the kind of specifics, though, that are very helpful for us. As I've mentioned in my opening statement, that, we look at policy and, oftentimes we just look at the the written words as opposed to thinking about what your practices are and what you are actually going through. And those are critical examples that really do help us in so many different ways to try to figure that out. So we appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Watne?
On my farm, we participate in just about all the programs. We're active in direct and counter-cyclical programs, DCP. We have used the loan program in the past, not as much as late, as market prices have been substantially higher than loan rates. And, of course, crop insurance. But if I had to rate them, the crop insurance in North Dakota is probably the primary, most important. We have a lot of risk and a lot of weather conditions that impact our crops. And without multi-peril crop insurance that we could show our lender at least a minimum amount of return that we can get to pay back our loans, we wouldn't be able to get financing in the state. So federal crop insurance is a key. And then, of course, putting SURE on top of that adds about 11% potential income increase if we have a major disaster. We did look at the acre program briefly this year, and I wrote this in my testimony. I was very tempted to sign up for it because I seen it as a revenue assurance. Just the fact, though, that I had to rely on a state trigger and a farm trigger at the same time is what scared me away. There's many times in North Dakota where the state won't have an overall impact where a trigger would be met and an individual farm could be met simply by a localized drought or a localized excessive rain or potentially a hailstorm. So, but
So
I would
that's what kept you away from the acre?
Yeah, that state trigger was just too broad. It's very likely that you could have a pretty strong loss on your farm and not see the state trigger met. So crop insurance to me is probably our most important one.
But you do participate in the direct payment?
Yes, we do. Yep.
I just wanted to, I know that you had some concerns about that, and I wasn't sure if your concerns were really focused on that you wanted to see it changed, or did you want to see it eliminated?
What I really want to see is, I think farmers are quite proud, and they'd rather see a system where we were paid if we were having a tough time because of market prices or something. So a counter-cyclical type payment. I don't want that money taken out of the egg baseline. I'd rather see it shifted to a counter-cyclical type payment.
Okay. Well, thank you. And just back to what you were talking about in terms of that state trigger being broad, and certainly to what Mr. Pawelski said, in our circumstances in Arkansas, we saw floods, some folks that planted twice, some of them 3 times in the spring after being flooded out, but then also being flooded out in the fall during harvest, finding that they had, I saw thousands of acres underwater for at least a week to 10 days right before harvest, which was unbelievably awful. So, but some of those were localized. Our state probably would have probably did hit the state trigger because we had so many counties, but nonetheless, I can see how it could have been localized even worse. So, well, thank you all. Just in general, what is your response to the concerns of the complication of safety net programs? Do you all find, I mean, many of you all have worked with them through the years, and Mr. Pawelski, you've certainly expressed concern about the application of certain programs, but the complicated nature of that, does anybody want to expand on that?
Yeah, the complicated nature of the rules that we have been given through the 2008 Farm Bill.
Well, and the safety net programs in general.
Prior to this Farm Bill, we've been able to do all of our own work. My family and I have done our own work ourselves in explaining who we are, meeting the payment eligibility rules. This Farm Bill has been so complicated and so confusing, we've had to, with along everybody else, to hire a lawyer to make sure that we are doing what is asked of in this Farm Bill. The financing rules, it's just unbelievable. I get confused even today, and that's what I spend most of my time working on day in, day out, is making sure that what we have done is correct. We still are waiting to be approved from our state FSA office on our farm, whether we are the changes we've made in our operation have been approved or not.
Anybody else?
Say that we haven't applied yet for the SURE program because we had a decent year in 08. 09 we'll be applying, and but my understanding is it won't be until December, but I looked it over and it's had my head spinning already, so the application process I'm looking forward to, but it seems extremely complicated. Crop insurance, that's just been understanding the bureaucracy. Again, it's been 14 years my wife and I have worked on that. It's got a heck of a learning curve as far as understanding how the maze works.
Did any of you all apply for the ACRE program? None?
I was going to allude to the ACRE program. As I understand it, in Georgia, I don't think there is a single farm that is enrolled in the ACRE program.
Well, Dow indicated there's only 2 in Arkansas, so.
With high input crops, it just does not, the revenue does not work out in the program.
Well, just, yes.
If I could comment about it, the sign-up has actually been quite simplified, I think, for the current existing program. I think the confusion has came in when we're trying to recalculate what benefits we might get out of SURE, or even trying to calculate the ACRE program, the benefit side of it. It wasn't that it was so complicated. It was a little bit hard to try to guess what the prices and the market prices might do and how that would impact you. And that's where farmers got quite nervous when they were looking at it. But as far as signing up for the farm program, I found it to be quite simple. There's an occasional question or two that makes you a little suspicious if they're digging for something that you might not want to answer, but the reality has been it's substantially easier to sign up at USDA than it has been in the past.
Just last, it's been a general trend, I guess, to develop safety net programs that provide protection against revenue loss as opposed to yield losses. What would be your recommendations on the next Farm Bill to continue in that trend or not? Any?
Well, we would certainly have to be considerate of the trade relations and the effects that different types of payments will make on our relations. And even though the revenue side is ultimately the goal of whether it's crop insurance on yield-based or whether it's a revenue assurance program, we still would have to be careful there. But we do need these safety nets.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Yeah, if I could comment on the revenue insurance, it makes a lot of sense that we could have that option, but I do get a little fearful because when you start doing it in a light of an insurance type program, that we tend to write underwriting rules or things that are based upon avenues to save money. And then, of course, it all depends on where you base the primary starting point, the price point. If we can do that off of a cost of production, a USDA cost of production or something, or not, and not based on average market prices from a time frame when the prices don't represent the true cost of production, would make a big difference. So revenue assurance can work, but it needs to have some basis behind cost of production. And then, of course, it's got to be based at a level where the farm itself can qualify rather than having to see a large region qualify before you trigger the payments.
Sure.
I just might add that it would need to be regionalized. The cost of production doesn't need to be represented for the state or the Mid-South. You need to break it. It would need to be broken down into the counties, per se. Although that our production, our goal of raising rice is the same in Arkansas as it is in California. Our costs are vastly different, and those things would need to be regionalized.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I'll turn it over to Senator Chambliss.
Thanks very much. All of you were sitting here when we had the conversation with Secretary Vilsack relative to getting younger farmers into agriculture, and I was in Roberta, Johnny, last Saturday with 200 Georgia young farmers, and I dare say that 100% of the folks who were there that day are young people who are returning to their own family farm versus individuals just going out on their own, deciding they want to get into farming and being able to do so. This is a real problem, and I just want to throw it out there. If any of you have any comments, suggestions, or whatever that we might think about, all of you obviously have had experience, whether you went back to your family farm or whether you began on your own, and I noticed in the case of a couple of you there, you've got children that may be thinking about coming back and going into your operation. What are your general thoughts, Mr. Brantley? We'll start with you relative to the availability of agriculture for young people.
You know, I'm fortunate that I was able to join a family farm, and you alluded to that fact that most young people coming back are able to join a family farm, and it's been very difficult for individuals who want to start out on their own for young individuals to go to the FSA program or to the FSA office and receive some funding to start a viable operation. I think for someone to get in the business today, you almost need a mentor. You need someone who can help you get started. It would take a unique individual today to decide that he or she wants to farm, and to have the capital to do that. I don't know how. I'm not that person. I was fortunate to join a family operation. There are plenty of those operations around that are looking for young people today. Maybe we can think of a creative way to start a mentor-type program, and that's not the proper word, but some type of a program to allow someone that is ready to retire or slow down to have a young person who is interested to come in and join their operation.
In Chairman Lincoln's opening remarks, I thought I was in the wrong room when she said she had an outstanding panel of young farmers. That is a problem in Georgia. It's a problem I'm experiencing in my family. I have a son that's decided that after all these years of low wages on the farm, he's seeking other avenues. But I would venture to say that the biggest problem we have in getting a young person established on a farm, a mentor idea would be excellent. It is extremely hard for a young person with all the desire in the world to go out and get started farming on his own. I don't know whether RMA could come up with some yields, some type of yield program where if you do not have a history, you have to start with the T yield, which is traditionally a very low yield. Financing is a problem. Crop insurance could help cover some of the financial risk, certainly for a beginning farmer. But there are very few avenues for a young person with a true desire to farm to have the ability to start farming in our community.
I started working on the farm when I was 5 years old. My first job was picking up onions that fell out of a crate, which I hated. I started driving heavy farm equipment on the road by the time I was 11, trucks with no doors and stuff like that, and aspects I liked, but by the time I was older, I grew tired of it, and I actually went away, and my bio mentioned, I did my graduate work at the University of Iowa. We had a great year last year, by the way, in college football. But I was a PhD student in broadcasting and film studies. I actually studied James Bond. But after I got married, I had office jobs, and I would look out the window at the guys mowing the lawn, and I was wishing I was outside doing what they did. So I moved back to the farm. My poor wife, who I met at Iowa grad school, didn't have this background from Wisconsin, and I kind of feel sorry for her because she's been dragged into this, and it's been year after year of disaster and scraping by, and she does all the finances. I don't even look. I work and I come inside and she pays the bills somehow, and credit card to credit card and so on and so forth. Going back to what Secretary Vilsack said, the best way to get people young working on the farms and stay in the farms is make it profitable. And the thing is, I'm not looking to be an Elmer J. Fudd millionaire and own a mansion and a yacht. I would just like to make a living. That's what I'm looking for. Make a living. There's aspects of farming. I'm an hour north of New York City, and a lot of people that I know and friends of mine commute down to the city. As a matter of fact, my brother, he farms part-time, and he also is a headhunter. He places people in international equities markets in Europe and Asia. So he farms part-time, and he goes down to the city and meets people and places them in these sorts of jobs. A lot of my friends commute. My commute, I walk outside 5 feet out the door, and I'm in my yard where my barn is. I drive tractors and trucks, which I love. I wear funny suits where I wear nice Tyvek suits and helmets and stuff and spray. I love the work. I see my family all the time. I see my boys every day. That's stuff that my wife's family, where her father used to work outside of Chicago, she never had. All I want to do is make enough of a living that I can provide for my family. And if we can get things like a little better of a safety net, and I can get a better return on my onions, the things that was talked about a little later when you were talking to Mr. Stallman and Mr. Johnson about about as far as I think it was Senator Roberts was talking about the return and the possibility of concentration and such. Well, I got the same thing in my crop with how my product is sold, where I'm getting $6.50 pounds, and I look in the grocery store and what the price is going there, a heck of a lot more for something that's virtually nothing value added. But all I'm looking for is just to make a living, and if we can make it a little bit more profitable, I think you'll see a lot more people, including my kids, staying on the farm.
Yeah, I really think it's as simple as your last statement there. We have to make some reward for the risks it's taking in agriculture. We have to get back to profit potential. It's been interesting in our state that we're finally seeing some young people wanting to come back, and the parents, instead of telling them, whatever you do, don't come back to the farm, they're starting to talk, maybe you should come back to the farm. Of course, we've seen this rapid rise in price and commodity prices and expectations that we may reach new plateaus. I'm not 100% comfortable we've seen these new plateaus, because we've seen barley prices drop down to LDP rates just last year again. But that optimism, the potential for optimism and the ability for people to make a profit, somewhere along the line we have to start thinking how we can price the amount that we actually need each year on what its fair value is, rather than pricing every bit of production on that small amount of overproduction that we ship into either the export market or sits in storage. I really think we have a backward system in that light. If we have 1 bushel extra production of wheat, we price all the bushels on the 1 bushel of extra production. We need to, and I said it in my testimony, we need some reserve system that doesn't force the consumer to be reliant on a just-in-time inventory, but also doesn't burden the marketplace that we drive our prices so low that there is no reward for the risks that farmers and ranchers take.
As Mr. Cochran knows, we have what we call the Southeastern Agricultural Expo in my hometown every year. It's the largest farm equipment show east of the Mississippi River. And I'm always amazed at that show as to the advancement of technology when it comes to agriculture. Mr. Watne, let's start with you. What do you, from a technology standpoint, what's your biggest asset? Where do you see technology with respect to agriculture production going?
Well, there's 2 areas. One is in just simply the way we plant our crop. We're using GPS. We're using very large tractors. We do what would be considered a minimum tillage, 1-pass operation. It has brought our expenses down, which has enabled us to continue to produce at these lower prices in comparison to what inflation should have did with the prices of commodities. The second area is genetics. I really think genetics is going to allow a wider area of crop selections that we can grow in our state and make us able to choose from different crops. But all in all, it gets me back to my earlier point. I don't believe that there's any worry that we can produce what the world needs in food. I also believe we can supply a vast percentage of the energy for this nation. I'm not the least bit concerned that we can meet that demand because technology will allow it. So I think that we really have to rethink our pricing mechanism so we can try to figure out the avenue to continue to grow this. Technology is very important to our farm, and it's really been the only savior that's been able to keep our expenses in line to keep our farm operational.
Right. Mr. Pawelski.
We still use ACGs from the 1950s, and all of our crawlers, we have a Cat 22, so we're not as advanced as that. We have some newer tractors, but technology comes in, and being we're fruit and vegetables and such, a lot of times with the development of seeds and stuff, we're on the lower end of the scale as far as time-wise. We're still waiting for some GMO crops. If there was a Roundup-ready onion, I'd grow that in a heartbeat instead, because the amount of on muck soils especially, the amount I have to apply two different pre-emerge chemicals 3 times and 2 different post-emerge materials 2, 3, 4 times. So if I had a one-time spray Roundup ready, I would be doing that. We do have so some advancements as far as some of our hybrids and the like. Technology is more important for me as far as on the public policy end. The stuff that I do with this kind of thing, with crop insurance, or the stuff I've worked on where I've met you one time before on the labor issue, when you had that meeting set up a few years ago regarding the immigration and H-2A reform, that I was Senator Clinton's designee at that meeting, which was an excellent meeting. I worked with your staffer, Camilla Knowles, over the years. It was excellent on that issue. The technology has enabled me and my wife, the changes that we were able to do with the crop insurance, we never would have done 20 years ago or 15 years ago. It's all been, we've been able to do because of the computer, the internet, email, and the like. If it wasn't for that, we simply wouldn't have been able to do all this public policy stuff. That's where it's come in handy for us, which has been a benefit not just for our farm, but for our whole region, and helped them in some aspects for our state. We're hoping that the other things will happen to us down the road, more so for our crops, as our onion crop as well. But that's where it's come into play for us.
We also use GPS-guided tractors, which is an added benefit for the skill. It's a double-edged sword for the skill of the operator needed. He needs to have computer skills to a degree, but he does not need as good steering wheel skills. But that, along with the genetically modified cotton that we're using, has been a tremendous increase in yield, which has allowed us to stay in production with the prices that we've seen that are not much higher than they were 10 years ago, whereas in the last 10 years, the average yield on the farm has just about doubled due to genetically altered seed. And we're also implementing strip till, which is a very fuel-efficient way of agricultural production for us.
I would reiterate a lot of what they said. We try to use all the technologies that are available today, from the computer to the guidance systems. You name it, we'll try it. Anything that can lower our production cost, we're going to give it a try. But it's really exciting to know that the technology is there for us to feed and clothe the world the next 40 years through doubling our output that we are today. What we need, or what I need, is a simple farm program that will back us up in those tough times. A program that's simple to understand and operate, that allows me to spend most of my time growing these crops that we do.
Well, gentlemen, can't thank you enough for taking your time, particularly in the middle of a busy growing season, to come up and give us the benefit of your thoughts. This is the first in a number of hearings that we're going to have as we lead up to the 2012 Farm Bill, so this won't be the last time we look to you for advice and input as to some of the issues that we're going to have to be dealing with. So thanks to each of you for taking time to come and share your thoughts with us today. Hope all of you have your best yields ever and the best prices ever.
Thank you, Senator Chambliss. I, too, want to add my thanks and would just reiterate, please don't underestimate the role that you play as we move forward. We hope that we'll continue to have contact with you all, and you can share your ups and downs with us and how we can better improve the Farm Bill in 2012. And more importantly, I hope you'll encourage your colleagues and your organizations that you are participatory in being able to weigh in as well, because that's very important for us to hear from you. So thank you all so much for taking time to be with us today. And with that, our hearing is adjourned.
Good job, Madam Chairman.